like it to open it up to public comments on non-agenda items. See if there's anybody from the public who wants to start with public comments on non-agenda items. Nancy, did you get a heads up from anybody?
Vice Mayor, I didn't receive any requests ahead of time, and I see no hands raised.
Okay, so let's just move on. We don't need to take a roll call or do anything fancy like that, do we?
Not tonight, Vice Mayor. Just
good to go. So let's get started with our work session, rental housing registration update. Just take it away. I guess maybe City Manager Janine Jordan, are you going to start us out here?
I sure am. Thank you. Vice Mayor, welcome everybody. We thought that since we have sort of gotten into, or I should say past really, the first quarter of the year where we were implementing the rental housing code, we just wanted to give a quick update to City Council tonight with respect to the work that's gone on in that quarter and share with you some statistics as to utilization and licensing and registration of rental housing units in the city thus far. Just to restate our intention and your intention in adopting this ordinance, it is in its implementation phase and will not take full effect until the 1st of January on 2023. Right now, we're just working with folks to start that implementation phase. Our intern in the City Manager's Office, Owen Schilt, has worked with myself, Todd Fieser, and the City Clerk, Nancy Bartholomew, to put together the presentation tonight, and I think Owen will walk us through that. Council, as just a note, there is really no substantive discussion expected. This is purely an opportunity to take about 15 minutes tonight, provide you some update and information and facts, and really not a point for discussion. And I'm not sure if you've had a chance to check your inbox today, but we had reiterated that to you through myself and the City Attorney's Office earlier today. So if you don't have any questions for me, I'm happy to let Owen walk you through the presentation and welcome Owen Schilt. I believe many of you have met him. For those of you who have not, he's been interning in the City Manager's Office for nearly a year now, actually, about 10 months. Any questions for me, Council? Okay, Owen, it's all yours.
All right, well, I guess we'll get started. Like City Manager Jordan said, my name is Owen Schill, and I'm going to be talking you through just the update on the rental housing licenses right now. And there will be time for questions at the end of the presentation, if there are any. So just to go over the rental housing definition, the first thing is, and the most important thing really is bullet point A here, and that is that Airbnbs are exempt from this ordinance because they are considered transient lodging. We've gotten a lot of questions about whether or not people have to register their Airbnbs under the rental housing applications, and that's mainly, those are mainly reserved for permanent housing and dwelling units, not transient lodging. So just an update on where we are at in our current licenses. As of July 20th, 2022, so Thursday of last week, there were 61 licenses that have been issued out of 82 total applications received. There are 36 license holders that make up those 61 licenses that have been issued. There's 103 dwelling units that have been registered, which equates to $4,120 in revenue. There are 3 applications on hold in the review stage and 18 outstanding applications awaiting payment, which equates to $3,800 in outstanding revenue. And on the right here, we can see 2 graphs. The top graph is applications received during each month. And we see a sharp spike in June. And then on the bottom is number of licenses issued each month. And we've issued more this July than we have in any previous months. So how have we communicated this ordinance to the public? There's a few ways, and we'll go over each of these very shortly. So yeah, we'll start with business cards. These business cards have been put on the city website, the Facebook page, and they are available upon request at the utility buildings front desk in City Hall. And the main thing with these is just an easy way to get information out to landlords in the city. This was our first news release on April 7th, 2020. This was a week after the housing license applications went up. This was the first news release, and it was mainly just getting the news out there to the public, letting landlords know that this is something that the city passed. This is something that they need to apply for and do.
Where you want to head to?
News release 2 was July 15th, 2022, so Friday of 2 weeks ago. This was kind of just a reiteration of the first news release, getting information out there, but this was also an update. At the time, we had some 90 rented dwelling units that had been registered, and we were trying to encourage more landlords to register their rental housing with the city. So that was news release 2. The Laramie City website, this is the rental housing page, and from here you can access the ordinance that was passed, the resolution adopting all the fees, and then you can also access the website where landlords go to apply for their license. This is our Facebook page with one of the posts of the rental housing registration. This is just another way of us publicizing that the rental housing licenses are now open. You can see that we use the business card in one of our rental housing posts for the Facebook page. And again, it links you to the city website, and from there you can access the application page for applying for a license. So we're just going to go over some frequently asked questions very quickly. And if anybody has any more questions or needs to know any more information, that can be accessed through the city website once again. So one of the questions that we've gotten is what protections exist for the landlords. The ordinance was mainly to establish general health and safety for properties that landlords are renting out, and it wasn't meant to bring a burden to the landlords. It was rather just to establish habitability standards. Second question that we've gotten is, why did the city pass this ordinance? And once again, it was just to make sure that homes meet minimum habitability standards in order to safeguard health, property, and well-being of owners, occupants, and the users of rental housing. And so once they're licensed with the city, that means that the city has determined that, and the city and the landlords have determined that their housing meets habitability standards. So when do you have to be registered by? That is on January 1st, 2023. The housing and registration for licensing opened on April 1st, 2022, and it will become enforceable by complaint on January 1st, 2023. There's more information about this on the city website. Another question we've gotten is about carbon monoxide detectors. According to the International Residential Code, a carbon monoxide alarm needs to be installed outside of each bedroom, except when there is a fuel burning appliance located within the bedroom or an attached bathroom, in which case a carbon monoxide alarm needs to be installed within the bedroom. And finally, once again, just to hit the nail on the head, do I have to register my Airbnb as a rental property? No. Under City Ordinance 8.80.020, rental housing, point A, rental housing is defined as a dwelling unit which is the subject of a rental agreement, except the following living arrangements: occupancy and transient lodging. Therefore, Airbnbs do not need to be registered with the city as rental housing. They are transient lodging. So if anybody has questions, now is the time to ask. And these is contact info if you need to reach out and get some clarifying information after the meeting.
Just to wrap up, Council, those are kind of the performance metrics thus far. Owen's been assisting myself and Todd and Nancy Bartholomew with just processing applications once we receive those from the landlords. In speaking with some folks who went through the process, seems to be pretty straightforward, simple online application with really rapid response with the help of our intern, and then the issuance of the rental housing license to the landlord within literally days in most cases. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And if you have any other questions, Todd and I are here to answer those.
Great, thanks, Janine. Any council members have a question?
Vice Mayor, I'd offer as well, if you think of anything after the fact, you're welcome to email us as well. Of course, knowing that we do have other topics tonight, but yeah, we can take those now or by email elsewhere and wise.
Great, thanks. I don't see any council members wanting to make a comment. How about if we go to public comment on this particular item? I don't see that as well. I don't see anybody's hand raised for public comment. So without objection, I guess we just move on to public relations update. So thank you, Council. We'll move on, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, great. Let's move on to public relations update.
I think I will start this one off as well, Vice Mayor Pierce. I actually, Nancy Bartholomew, you had asked me earlier if I would like to share screen, and I would, but if you wouldn't mind, if I could send it to you, and you could share screen for the presentation, that would actually probably be helpful to me tonight, because I'm looking at a lot of different screens. I think I need some help. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Council, so we wanted to take some time this evening with you to provide an update on some of the city's public relations efforts over the past 12 months. And I've chosen to focus on the last 12 months this evening for a couple of reasons. The first being that you will recall in your last budget, you had allocated some funding. And this is what I should clarify, not your last budget, because technically your last budget you adopted was in June of 2022. So I would say your second to last budget in June of 2021. As you'll recall, there was some budget allocation made by the City Council so that we could look to bringing on more professional resources to help the City of Laramie connect with its residents and with folks in the community. So for that reason, I've intended tonight to focus on the last sort of 12 months. What I'll tell you is that with your direction to kind of explore some new methods that we might use for engaging the public and reaching out to them, we've kind of done 3 categories of things that we'll talk about tonight. The first is really our traditional activities that we take on here as city staff. So direct community relations through really kind of 3 subparts. The first being our social media pages, the second being our city website, and the third being that really super uber traditional approach to public relations where you're putting out the traditional press release, you're sending those to the media, and I would add our city quarterly newsletter to that category of really kind of traditional outreach that cities use when they're engaging in community relations. So that's one broad category. Our second broad category that we've really stepped into for the first time this year is to improve how we kind of actively monitor and then ideally, based on that monitoring, target engagement out to the community. So you will recall, Council, that we have partnered with a group called Zen City this year. We brought them in, I believe, February to do a work session with you, or excuse me, it was April, but we engaged them by contract in February with a work session with you in April. What Zen City does is they are monitoring sentiment across all of the metaverse, I guess I would say, but on the internet, our website, social media, all of the publicly available platforms, they use AI to monitor sentiment about city activities and sentiment in response to city community relations that we might issue. We anticipated with entering into contract with them in the early part of this calendar year that there'd be this initial data collection phase, and that's really where we've been for the last 4 and 5 months in our partnership with Zen City. We've received some real-time data on general civic concerns. We've also received some data about sentiment. This is their phraseology, but sentiment surrounding municipal actions and activities. And then using that data gathering, we're now entering into, in the next, say, 4 to 6 weeks, what I call the actionable phase. We're using that data. We're able to then start to engage in targeted press and targeted outreach through social media and through our website. I'll give you a specific example is, for instance, we have been tracking what we just talked about, right, in the last work session, which is the discussion that was being had about the quality and the habitability of rental housing in the community, and then subsequently the ordinance that you all adopted to ask for licensing and registration of those units in the city. So we've measured that sentiment. We also had just concluded the first data gathering phase of 3 months on the citizen survey that Zen City put out for us electronically, and we actually will be looking at some of that data later this week, and then ultimately we'll be bringing it back to you and sharing it with you as well. But using all of that to be more targeted in how we approach public relations. Okay, so those are your first 2 categories, and then I want to mention as well a third category that we're really kind of in the infancy phase of, and that is to engage more professional services. So with your budget allocation in June of 21, we've engaged Zen City, and I also sought in January of this year, so January of 22, to bring onto our outside support staff by contract professional public relations services. So I put out a request for proposal. I'm sad to report to you that even after extending the RFP date to March of 22, we originally sought proposals to come in early February. We didn't get any proposals. So what I did is in May and in June, I was able to talk with some other city officials around the state and the region and kind of compiled a short list of firms that other sister cities in our area have worked with and have been reaching out to them specifically to try to engage them one-on-one. At this point, I feel like we have a really good possibility of entering into a professional services contract with a firm out of Casper. I'm going to decline to use their name tonight, only because we haven't actually executed that contract, but I reached out to them. We had a really great conversation. They've actually worked with other cities, including the city of Casper, and so they're eager, I think, to work with us, but they're putting the final touches on an actual proposal that I should receive here in the next probably week to 10 days, with the notion being that I'd like to enter into a contract for a 6-month sort of pilot period to see how our relationship would work with a professional who would be outside of the city, but really working as a member of city staff to do more two-way communication streams and dovetail off of that real-time data that we're gathering through Zen City. So those are kind of your big 3 categories, and I know that's a lot that I've just said. We've also prepared a report to show you actual data metrics as far as what we've been up to for the last 2 months and kind of give a snapshot of what goes on a day-to-day basis here at the city. But before I move to that, I'll stop and take a breath and let you guys ask some questions, if that's okay, if you have any.
Go ahead, Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Can you hear me all right? Sometimes these AirPods are not great. Okay, perfect. Janine, I was curious, given that there was not any responses from firms, was there any consideration given to hiring an individual that would work in a contract position as a member of city staff, or maybe like a little closer to the city? It does seem like this job could be filled by an enterprising individual, and certainly we have those folks in our community. But if the RFP is for firms, there is not a social media firm in Laramie that I'm aware of right now. But I'm curious if an individual was considered.
Councillor Harrington, through you, Vice Mayor Pierce, I think that's a really great question. And let me share, if I can, with you my rationale. And I think you all heard this back in May of 21 as well. But from my standpoint, you know, my professional recommendation to you all would be to do what we're doing. And I think this is what I said in May and June, which do what we're doing is to explore other tools and bringing people on by contract, firms on by contract. The reason for that, let me kind of share my rationale with you. I'm not opposed to hiring a city staff person who's like our public relations, our PR person. But when I look at the body of work that we're able to put forward with existing staff, and we're going to do that in a minute, but when I look at that, and I look at where I really think we need resources, I think we need not just someone to push out social media. And I'm going to show you some statistics. We're pushing out almost 2 social media posts per day, just with the existing staff we have as a matter of just ongoing business. I feel like we need kind of a jack of all trades. We need someone who can go out and create original video content for us to make our social media, frankly, a lot less boring and governmental and create some maybe cool video content that truly engages people where they want to watch the video and that video serves the purpose of not only engaging them, but also teaches them something about what the city does, or helps them understand a part of our activities, or helps them gain a better understanding of something that you all are working on. So, like, I feel like we need a videographer. We need someone who's schooled in public relations. We need someone who understands how to effectively use social media, who also is conversant in traditional media, because this is Wyoming and we still do have some more traditional radio and video and television news sources. So that's part of the reason I wanted to explore a contract, because, for instance, the firm that I'm talking with in Casper, and excited and hope to introduce you to soon if it works out, they have staff that encompass all of those areas, if that makes sense. My other main reason for wanting to try to bring on a firm by contract, in addition to they bring so many more skills to the table, is because, you know, I've been through a lot of Wyoming boom and bust cycles being a native, and I've been through a lot of Wyoming boom and bust cycles that trickle down to cities like ours. And we have seen times when we've had to let staffing and certain positions go. We've had layoffs. And what I am concerned about is if we could hire someone on contract, we gain a lot more flexibility. And if we do see a cut in, say, the direct distribution by the legislature, which we hear all the time they may want to eliminate, then I feel like we're going to be better positioned not to have to lose all of our public outreach and public relations if that is the position that is the first to go, because we can maintain it on contract. So I hope that makes sense. And I just want to reiterate that I'm not opposed to hiring someone, but I almost feel like our dollars might go further under a contract, and I'd really love to explore that before bringing a permanent member of staff on board with that as their sole function. And presumably one of the functions that might be easiest to let go of if we find ourselves in a severe revenue shortfall.
Go ahead, Councillor Schmeckel.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Janine, I'm curious if you've reached out to other governments in Wyoming that have had like a public information officer. Like I know Campbell County had one for a while, to see if they've had experiences like this and what they would do differently, or if they would continue with what they had or what have you.
Thank you. Through you, Vice Mayor. That's a great question, Councillor Schmeckel. So at WHAM, this was one of the reasons I was excited that we had WHAM in Laramie, because it gave me a lot of opportunity in June to talk to some of those folks. I do know, and you're correct, I think it's Jackson, City of Jackson with Teton County, they had a full-time position up there. I would reiterate, they have a lot more resources than we have, but they did have good success with that. And had nothing bad to report, frankly. But then as I spoke to other communities who had done, you know, this sort of approach to bring people, a firm on contract to them, they also had good success. And so I can't tell you that when I talked to my colleagues that any of them were definitive in saying, nope, you want a staff person, or nope, you want to work with a firm on contract. It seemed to be kind of a mixed response. And I know you guys talk to those folks too. So if you have thoughts or if you've talked to people, I'd always appreciate to hear that.
Okay, Counselor Cumby.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. City Manager Jordan, I'm just curious. We advertised and put out the request for proposals and received none. And I'm just curious if this company comes on board, whether it might be efficacious for them to do somewhat of a meta-analysis to find out, why didn't anyone respond? Why didn't they respond? Did they see our ad and not think it was interesting? Did they not see our ad? It just seems kind of ironic that we were asking for communications support and people in communications didn't respond or maybe even see our communication. So there might be some valuable information there that can help us in our quest to reach the public.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm laughing not at your question, Councillor Cumby, through you, Vice Mayor Pierce, but just that, yeah, it seems a little bit ironic, doesn't it? Let me tell you what I think is going on, and it's speculation, but based in part on some of the feedback I got when I called the firms, and one of them, in particular, the one I'm excited to potentially work with in Casper, they said, you know, like, we don't really mine public request for proposal sites the way, for instance, a contractor would who builds roads, right? They actually have people whose job is to be watching and searching and mining the internet for those requests for proposals. It's kind of an old school government way of trying to solicit services. And frankly, I don't think many of these firms, and there's quite a few around Wyoming, I've learned now after putting out the request for proposal, but it's not the way they really do business. We have, for instance, here at the city, and under statute and under municipal code, we have an obligation to maintain what's called a bidders list. Well, when I looked at our bidders list, there are no public relations firms there. I mean, they just don't seem to do business that way in that old school government approach. So I use that more old school government approach because it is typical and it is where we usually start when we solicit services, but it became readily apparent that, you know, we had to go and really drum up that interest. When I shared with these groups the RFP that we did put together, because I put a lot of work into that, frankly. It really says everything I think we need there. You know, they said, wow, this makes sense and this is great. We just wish we'd known it's out there, but we don't go out and look for this kind of stuff.
Okay. Councillor Harrington.
Vice Mayor, I can wait for my second time until Councillor Gabriel goes if you'd like.
Sure, that works too. Councillor Gabriel.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Janine, I was just curious if this firm that you're talking to in Casper is, and I might have missed this, but I'm not sure if you mentioned, are they going to be doing similar type things, or is this situation in Laramie a little bit different than maybe some of the other cities on communication and web, so on? I was just curious.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Clerk, after I did ask if you'd do the share screen, I have another document. I could quickly show you guys the scope of work from the RFP. I just pulled it up. It's still on our website, and you can look at it. But I think this will help me answer your question, Councillor Gabriel. And that is the answer being no. I think once they've seen the request for proposal, they've said, oh, yeah, we do all this stuff. And I think you can see it now. I would highlight it here. Here's kind of the general scope of work. And what I was trying to say to these folks is you're the experts and we need help. So we kind of know what we want, but what we really want for you to do is take a look at what we're doing and then tell us what we're doing wrong and how you can fill the gaps. If I could take what I've highlighted here and break it into a really quick statement. When I have shared this with these firms, and they've said, oh yeah, we do this. In fact, the firm that I'm really interested in Casper, has a former municipal employee as part of their founding staff members. And so they tended to agree, yeah, cities do a lot of communicating, but they don't always do it in the most modern and thereby most effective way, and we can help with that. And they've said they are helping other people in particular, other entities in particular in Wyoming. Did that answer your question, Councilor Gabriel?
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Harrington.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. City Manager, I'm curious if in your conversations with this firm, I know you've not received their proposal, so if your answer is, I don't know, that is fully acceptable. But curious if there was any conversation about them working directly with staff members and sort of like, you know, fanned out across departments to ensure we're getting good content from staff members on sort of a regular basis. You know, it's, I do think it's important for us to have really high quality, like Laramie commercial type videos. I think you're right on there. But we also, you know, need like a fun video when there's something at the rec center or, you know, a video when there is something that needs repaired at the rec center and it's going to be closed. Having a video for that content, I think is always a strong option. And it would be valuable, I think, if they were willing to work with city staff, you know, whoever that falls to within a department to help produce some of that content, you know, not to post it or any of that sort of thing, but to actually create the content. And I'm curious, I guess, if that was part of the conversation at all.
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. And I'm glad to hear that you agree that we're deficient as an organization on video, because I think that's a big part of it. Social media and the internet dual medium, right? Heavy posts that, you know, very few people really want to read. So yes, the way I envision this council is if we get this firm on contact and we have a sort of designated representative from each department. But I also, who would work with them, Councilor Harrington, before I go off on my next thought tangent. But I also discussed with them this notion I have of things like this, like, you know, we have 270 city employees out every day doing amazing things in this community, and every single one of them have video in their pocket in the form of a smartphone, right? And so one of the kind of ideas that I had is I said, you know, we could do a video challenge with our staff. Like, take a cool video of something you're doing that you think the public might be interested in, and then we can feed that in a prioritized way and in a logical prioritized way to our consultant, who can then edit that video into something that's meaningful to the public. Oh, look, the pump in the pool broke, and like, here's what it actually really looks like, instead of this really text-heavy, oh, sorry, the rec center's closed, the pool pump broke. There's a Facebook page that, you know, your geeky city manager subscribes to, that's for people that work in wastewater systems who have an association on Facebook and post like really icky videos, but very interesting if you're in the field of wastewater management kinds of videos, but things that I think the general public would appreciate seeing. I think Councilor O'Doherty has mentioned before that if people could see us cleaning out the main lift and those baby wipes that actually are not flushable, even if they say they are, that kind of stuff I think would engage people, and it would really, we probably would have to put that video up once, where we'd have to put up a text-heavy, please don't flush the baby wipe message 50 times to get across the same message that one video of the main lift would convey. So that's sort of what I imagined, is they don't necessarily have to come here as the consultant and take that video. We have 270 people with a camera in their pocket right now, and that could probably go a long way.
Great. Councilor Cumby.
Thank you. City Manager Jordan, I think that is a brilliant idea. And I just think it's things that would be very interesting to people to start to see, kind of like a reality show that you have, how it works. And I could imagine it being that kids would love to see that, like, how does it work? And I just think that's a brilliant idea to get closer to kind of what really goes on in the city. And I think you bring up a great point that we have over almost 300 employees that could retrieve great video, and then with some editing and polish, it could be something really fun. Thank you.
Wonder if we've just lost the vice mayor. Oh, no, there you are, Jane. You just moved.
Counselor
Looks like Counselor O'Doherty, yeah.
Yeah, Counselor O'Doherty.
Yeah. No, you were speaking the same language. I want all the videos to be about wastewater treatment, but just things like that showing how you have to spit out the things like eggshells and coffee grounds, like that has to be extracted before it moves along. So, like if people just saw it, knew it. I mean, I really want to educate the public, especially about wastewater, because so much could be, and recycling, when we see the stuff that's going in the can that is not supposed to be there, and so then I see it blowing down the street, or I think, oh well, mine's going to get contaminated because my neighbors didn't know you're not supposed to put this stuff in there. So I would think of it not so much as public relations, but public information, like communicating to our public. So I look forward to things like that, and I like your ideas. Thanks.
Those teachable moments. Counselor Gabriel.
Thanks once again. I just remembered a little bit earlier, the Tourism Board, which I'm liaison to, won a regional award for their website. They redid everything to kind of start over with their promotions. And I don't remember the firm they worked with, but that might be a possibility, just to kind of look into what they were doing, because they did an excellent job. And to win that regional award, they were very pleased with the way things turned out.
Great. Thanks, Counselor Gabriel. Counselor Schmeckel.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. City Manager, I'm curious, knowing that the city is not the only organization that's in this boat, have we reached out to any of our partners that are experiencing similar challenges and getting word out, like Laramie Main Street or the LCBA or tourism, to see if there's a collaborative effort on this? I'm also curious if we're looking into existing things we have, like the app for recycling, to see if that's a method of getting some important conversations out and what we're doing to get that tool utilized.
Thanks for that question. Let me, if I can, just ask a follow-up so I make sure I understand. When you mentioned collaboration, Councilor Schmeckel, do you mean that we would sort of push information to the public and then ask our partners to sort of repost it and share it as well, that kind of collaboration, or you mean a collaborative, like, public relations approach?
Since you bring up both, I'm going to ask for both.
Okay.
I think that there's opportunity in both.
Yeah, that's good. So we do. Let me say, as far as the reposting, like, for instance, if we put out something that we think is of particular interest to the downtown, we will oftentimes make sure that we direct post the press release, not only to the press, but to them, and say, hey, we think this is of interest, Laramie Main Street or Laramie Tourism. But we certainly don't oblige them to repost or to share our information. And then as far as a broader, more collaborative approach, we've talked about it over the years. Main Street did a marketing plan that looked at downtown a number of years ago, but really did have a broad reach, looking at the community and maybe kind of a community branding approach that we would all share. Some of the more senior members of council who have more years of service might remember that. Have you seen our Laramie logo with the big sweeping L? That Laramie logo, in fact, was a product of that more collaborative, broad-based logo and branding that we all being like tourism and LCBA and Main Street and the city, could use. And so we have, in some cases, dovetailed off of that kind of collaborative approach for a community brand. But by and far, and I think Councilor Gabriel just mentioned the tourism board's work, their new stuff is really phenomenal, but it isn't something that everybody agreed to share, and everybody being like the whole community, right? So maybe there's room to do better there, I guess. It depends on if we can get them to want to do that, or if they want to maintain their own sort of brand as Main Street or as the Chamber Business Alliance or whatever it may be. You asked me a second question, Councilor Schmeckel, and I've lost sight of it. I'm sorry.
I was curious about utilizing existing tools we have, specifically the Laramie recycling app.
Yeah, I want to say that, you know, from my standpoint, part of what I'm trying to create here with the working with a contract firm is to not recreate the wheel and to better use the tools that we do have and use them more effectively. So using the recycling app in, you know, keeping it focused on solid waste and recycling, I think does have some importance, but could we use it to sort of push other information? Yes, but I'm going to guess that our firm, and I'm speculating because I'm not a professional here in this realm, but I would guess that our firm would say, don't send out on your recycling app information about, you know, recreation classes. But we need to look at all of our tools and use them well. And one thing I'll give you an example of is we have talked for a number of years about purchasing software that will simultaneously post to every single of our social media pages, and we haven't pulled the trigger on it. And we need to, frankly, and it's in sort of the back of my mind once I get these other pieces in place with the allocation you all made, that we need to purchase that software. Because when I show you these statistics in a minute about Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, we're not being most cost effective in making, you know, these posts, because there is software out there that would allow us to go in, make the post, and the software will push it to every one of the social media outlets simultaneously. So in that regard, there are some tools we could use that would better use the tools we already have, if that makes sense. Would you guys like to see some of the data, and then we can do some more questions?
Great, thanks,
Okay.
Janine.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate all these questions. They're very helpful to kind of help me think this out as well. So I want to give some thanks to Nancy O.P., Nancy Oakland Potter, and to Todd Fieser, who helped me to gather this data. And what I wanted to do again is show you from the last 12 months kind of the main ways that we push out information or residents engage with us. And so we'll just kind of go through this. It's a lot, but we're not going to go through it word by word. The first big category that, where we see residents engage in a proactive manner with the city is through what I call our Q&A blog. We call this Ask Your Municipal Government. It's a feature on our website where people can go in and send us a question, and then we will answer that and post it to the blog, not only for the person who sent the answer, but for everybody else to see. And the rationale behind that, of course, is if one resident has the question, probably a whole lot more have that question. When I looked at the data from the last year, frankly, it's a little paltry. We've had 18 questions submitted in the last year. We have 60 people who've subscribed to the Ask Your Municipal Government blog. And what that means is that either through email or through text, they are notified anytime we get a question and post an answer. So 60 folks have actively subscribed to that. 18 questions have been submitted. And you can see on this first page, they run the gamut from what are the voting records of city council members to I have a problem with dog feces and garbage in my neighbor's yard. Going to the next page. Of course, we recently had a question about Blue Peak. Next page, everything from nuisance ordinance to our billing, to missing street signs, to citations in municipal court. Next page. How do I pay my trash bill? We get a lot of billing questions, if you can see that. Why did I have to wear a face mask in the Albany County Courthouse, in which case we never answer on behalf of other entities? We always refer them to the appropriate entity. Next page. And you'd be surprised, Council, how many questions we get about the county government functions, about YDOT functions, about really other levels of government that folks think we're responsible for. Here's one about, can I draw on the sidewalk with chalk? Is it legal? So, you know, they really run the gamut. I need a watch for children sign in my neighborhood. Next question, or next page. Yeah, that's it. And that's all blogged on the website. And I'll send you this report as soon as we're done if you want to go and read these in detail. But that's the totality of residents engaging with us through that tool on our website over the last year. The next kind of tool that residents have where they can initiate an interaction with the city is what I call this kind of one-click reporting. It's called Request Tracker. That's the feature. So residents will use this tool to report concerns about all kinds of things. And then we will follow up on them within 24 to 72 hours. We're really careful here to tell residents before they put in a request that it needs to be a non-emergent request, and we try to refer them for more emergent issues to the appropriate location. The status report as of today, in the last year, we've had 55 total requests submitted, and 33 are closed, 22 are pending completion. We usually respond to these very, very quickly, frankly. And as we ran this report that you're looking at on the page here, we note that the last 3 columns to the right are really reflecting data from the inception or the birth date of our website in 2011 through 2022 through today. So I would urge you kind of disregard those last 3 columns on the right. And what is really notable is that for the period of time of the last 12 months, we've had 55 residents interact with us through this request tracker portal. The third resident-initiated option is a subscription where residents can be notified of through either their email or by text across 27 different areas of city activities. This includes boards and commissions, the actions of you, the city council, press releases, and our city newsletter. I started probably about 5 years ago. Whenever somebody is newly elected to city council, I go in once you give us your contact information and your city email is set up, and been proactively registering city council members for the Notify Me in all of the 27 categories. So when you see the status report here saying right now we have 1,183 subscribers, 9 of them are you all. And this is how it breaks out by category in the report that we printed for you there. You can see City of Laramie bids are well subscribed to, and that kind of harkens back to what we were talking about earlier with bids and requests for proposals. And then also very largely subscribed to is City Council, of course. If you look down in the second half of the report, you'll see you have, I think, some nearly 100 people subscribed and receiving text or email about anything having to do with City Council. So those are the 3 kind of ways that residents engage with us, other than they drop us an email. I certainly didn't go back and count those. Those would be in the probably hundreds of thousands over the last year. Phone calls and those ways, but this is how they're engaging with us digitally through our website. So next I move to kind of staff-initiated items. We have since 2002 or 3, I think, as an intern, one of my early tasks was to create a city newsletter. So we've been doing this, I can vouch with confidence, for some 20 years. Nancy Oakland Potter spearheads this and works with a whole bunch of members of staff to publish quarterly our resident newsletter called the Gem City Spark. That is published and archived on our website. We used to do a mass mailing of that to every household in Laramie, and this is a point where I'd love to have your feedback. A number of years ago, we determined that we really didn't need to use all that paper and do that direct mailing, and so instead we went to a process of publishing only online. We do print a limited amount to be left, for instance, at the counter of City Hall here and other strategic locations like the Rec Center where people can pick those up and take them home and read them. We have 259 people who have subscribed through the Notify Me option to receive those delivered electronically. And then we also do allow for people to sign up to have the newsletter direct mailed to them if they prefer to receive it in hard copy. But you can see that really hasn't been that popular, 12 recipients there. So I guess the question I would have for City Council here is, do you think there is usefulness to direct mailing that newsletter 4 times a year in that old school way that we used to? Because honestly, we're not using much paper, but I wonder as well if the newsletter is reaching all the people that it needs to reach. And while you do that, I'm going to, while you give me your feedback on that, I'm going to send the clerk the latest newsletter so she can, or the newest version so she can show you what our current newsletter looks like.
Go ahead, Councilor Schmeckel.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm curious, City Manager, if there's a happy middle ground of sending a smaller postcard that would take less postage, that would direct the constituents online to get the full newsletter, and see if that's an option.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really great idea and a good suggestion. Lower cost alternative, fewer trees involved. What do the rest of you think?
Councilor Cumby.
I think that would be a great idea. I think it could be included in the utilities bills, that in the water waste bills that everyone receives, and have not only a website but also a QR code so that people could just click in and get the newsletter. I think that's a great idea, Councilor Schmeckel.
Any other opinions from council? Councilor O'Doherty.
Yeah, I recall that Blue Peak sent a piece of mail and a postcard to everybody in their area that they're affecting, and yet we've gotten a lot of questions about that. So I don't know how many people look at their mail. I think there are a lot of young people that don't even know that paper mail exists. So, but I could see getting, starting with a postcard and trying to get more people to sign up for the Notify Me. It's not, I don't think it's real intuitively obvious on the website. You already have to be into something to ask it to notify you about something. So something like a QR code, I think, would be a good way to do it. And I also have to say I'm excited about this Gem City Spark because of the pictures of the wastewater treatment problems. Thank you. Broken record.
Nancy's showing you the cover page. This newsletter, and I'm going to invite Nancy Oakland Potter to weigh in because she really does pull this document together for the organization. But Nancy OP, as the clerk scrolls down through the June publication, maybe you can talk a little bit about how many pages it is on average. I want to say it's like 3 to 5 pages on average, but you correct me if I'm wrong, Nancy.
So yeah, I would say 3 to 4, probably even more double-side pages, just depending on what's out there. We try to hit on current events, things like, as you can see, we talked on election stuff. I try to get some construction stuff. We reach out to each of the divisions and ask them to send us what's current and pertinent to the community. And I also like to kind of recycle some of our, just like your FYI to new community members, mainly like in the fall when we have our students coming into town, people moving in, just kind of good to know things for living in Laramie. And then just, wildfire stuff, that's, near and close to us, especially with that one not too far away from us now. But just good information that the community can use. Anything that's, new. We put in things about the rental ordinance that has come up. We include the Laramie Soup Kitchen to include something a little fun, a little, for the palate for people, just kind of wide variety of stuff. And as you saw before that, even just kind of including the kids in the community as well, get parents and families engaged. So that's pretty much what we do. And I like the toilet thing, they're doing not putting your wipes down the toilet. That was a revisit, and we just kind of update it as we need to. But yeah, got a lot of our divisions that are involved, and if they don't submit, I reach out to them.
That's a nice way that Nancy puts it. If they don't submit, she reaches out. That's that gentle reminder. I will say Nancy pulls it together, but she's absolutely correct. A very collaborative effort across all of the city's departments, and they're all submitting. For instance, how to properly display campaign signs comes from our nuisance enforcement officer, who every election season has to go out and remove campaign signs from the city right away, because of course that is in violation of city code, state law, etc. So trying to be timely and asking departments what's going on in the community that is under your purview at this point in time. So that's just a quick look at June's newsletter. And I've made note of your suggestion. Maybe we postcard it out to, Nancy, if I remember, we had, I think, 14,000 plus addresses that we were mailing this to when we used to mail it. When we did mail it, counselors, we tried to adhere to a very strict 4-page limit just because of the cost of postage. What going digital has allowed us to do is really push more timely information and more pages of that information. But again, it seems like for some reason it might be better to mail like some kind of notice through postcard or utility bill, as Councilor Cumby suggested.
So sorry, I have a question. Our utility bills, are people allowed to opt to receive those utility bills via email? And I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to this, but those that do automatic withdrawal, can they get that bill via email?
Yes, they can.
Okay, so I need to do that because mine's automatic withdrawal, but it still comes to the house. So, yeah, I need to change that. And considering we probably have a fair number of email addresses of citizens, is this how we're sending this particular information out to their email account, or? Okay.
Vice Mayor, yes, by email, or if they subscribe through Notify Me, they can also get a text message saying, oh, the Gem City Spark is released for the quarter, and a link to go there to view it on our website.
Okay.
Just in addition, I do post it on the Facebook page and do a news flash as well to let people know that it's out there.
Okay.
City Clerk, I know you are engaged in a lot with handling the screen share, but it looks like we do have one member of council at least who needs to be admitted to the panel. So that's the city newsletter, counselors. I'll move on to kind of the next section of staff postings, and this is our legally required legal notices. I thought I'd just mention those. They're not terribly informative, and they're not in any cool, kitschy video or audio or any kind of visual format. These are literally in the legal ad section of the Laramie Boomerang. The reason is that is required by law. As you know, we don't have much latitude in that. And in the last year, we placed 331 ads as required by law that were legal notices. Next page. So next category of sort of staff-initiated engagement is what I promised you were the sort of metrics on social media, marketing, and public relations. The city has 3 authorized Facebook pages. Yeah, this is sort of small, isn't it? I wonder if it's possible to zoom in. We have 3 authorized Facebook pages, counselor. We have 1 authorized Twitter page, and we have 1 authorized Instagram page. Residents, when we pulled the statistics that you see in the graph there, I can kind of sum it up broadly for you if you want to scroll up a little bit, City Clerk, but residents were engaged about twice per day on average, largely through Facebook. That is our main way that we reach people. Twitter is pretty light. We just don't get a lot of feedback there, and so we haven't really used it very intensely, and the same with Instagram. In total, we had 670 posts over the past year. On our main Facebook page, we pull statistics from the backside of Facebook. And pulling those statistics, we know we reached 74,334 unique users. We had 2,073 reactions, that's likes or dislikes, and on average 0.81 or just about 1 post per day. On the LPD's Facebook page, and they're kind of our newcomer to Facebook, Parks and Recreation has had a Facebook page for a number of years. LPD's is only a couple years old. But LPD's Facebook page is really well received and really engaging the community. They had just slightly less than 5,000 reactions, likes, or some such thing, and 9,265 shares, way more shares than, well, first of all, let me go back. The city's page, we do not allow shares, but Facebook does because they may, or excuse me, LPD does because they may be posting to Facebook about a lost child, for instance. And so the ability to share their postings is important, particularly where they're trying to get information to help somebody who's missing or to help find a lost child. Their posts per day have been 0.71, and the Parks and Recreation Facebook page in total had 236 reactions, 35 shares, and about a third of a post per day on average for what that statistic matters. If the clerk wants to scroll down just a little bit more, I want to point out that these Facebook posts are not the same as what is legally required. When I asked for this data, I was wanting to be careful to exclude anything that was required by law, so that we're showing really just like self-initiated information that is being pushed out into the community and that we were not required to push out. When you look at the likes and reactions on the police LPD's FB page, that's that middle column, I think you can really see how engaged people have been with that page over the last couple of years of its life. And really pleased to see that. For government entities, the question about 6 or 7 years ago of whether Facebook or social media more broadly was even appropriate, that was a big question 6 or 7 years ago. And the question was even more intense for policing, frankly. And so the chief was very cautious in taking this approach, and I think that cautious approach has been warranted, but I think we can see from these numbers that this is a really good venue, not only for PD, but for the city broadly, to engage with the public. This data here, just to clarify, is only the top 10 posts. So there are many, 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 many more posts, but it is those top 10 posts on the city's main page alone that reached 74,000 unique users. And so wanted to clarify that because I think I skipped over that before. So that's kind of the end of this report. I will take your questions and maybe also while the clerk takes this screen share down, I'll quickly just share with you the sort of detailed data that I didn't put out there, but just to show you, give you a kind of glimpse at the power that we have in measuring these metrics. I'll share my screen really quickly. Show you kind of what the detailed report looks like that we are able to pull up. So what you're looking at here is all of the city's Facebook pages, and I can sort this by who made the posting. Here's kind of what the posting was about. Here's the date and time. Was it mandatory and required by law or not? What was its reach, its engagement? What kind of reactions and shares did it receive? And there are, I don't know, nearly 1,000 entries as I scroll down this list that you see there. Last thing I'll mention as I kind of scroll down all of this gory detail is that we do have an archiving software that we put in place a few years ago that actually archives all of this as public record, with the recognition that this stuff really is becoming public record and we needed to archive it in the event that someone requested it. Some of the legal requirements as to archiving and what is public record or not are a little gray right now, but we determined to archive it, and I was actually talking with our IT manager about it today, for posterity, lest we not archive it and run afoul of the law at some future point. So all of this is available for purposes of looking at data and also public record. That is everything that we had prepared for you for tonight, Council. I'll just close by saying that I'd hoped that I'd be able to tell you we were under contract with the public relations firm. Unfortunately, I think we're probably days, if not, maybe a week at most away from that. But I am eager to bring them and introduce them to you, or at least show you some of their early work that they would do for us, so you can start to, with me, measure if that's effective or not, and our best course of action. And then also mentioning that our first data collection period with Sin City is closing, and likely we'll be sharing action plans based on that data with you as well in coming weeks. And with that, I'm ready for any questions or love to hear your thoughts.
Great. Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Janine, just two things first. I think this is a very welcome update. I've been curious about it and was happy to see this pop up on our work session schedule, and really appreciate it. And I think the level of detail you went into is really helpful. And seeing some of those analytics, I think, is also it's interesting to me. One thing you mentioned earlier that I would just maybe caution against is the one-size-fits-all sort of posting tool. And I think that, so the reason I would say that is the same content doesn't function the same on different platforms. So Facebook happens to succeed more often than not, I think oftentimes because it is the intuitive one that we have the most experience with. But these algorithms are changing regularly, and the type of content that works on them is just always changing. So what we post on Facebook is likely not going to be well received if we just sort of copy paste onto Instagram. It's not going to be the same sort of content that works. So I would just you are the lead on this, and I will follow, but I would caution against that. Just having a fair amount of social media experience myself, and sort of trying to figure out how to make this easier. I've been down this path, and it doesn't work as well as you might hope it will. So just was going to caution you on that, and then thank you for the presentation.
Vice Mayor, if I could, I appreciate that feedback, Councilor Harrington. And as you're saying that, I Twitter a little bit, but mostly Facebook. And I actually talked with the firm in Casper about this, that, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's the newer platforms like Instagram, and I can't even think what all right now. But the things that my 20 and 22-year-old use are not anything the city's engaged in. And so I think that's a really important comment. I'll make note of it. And this is where I would hope that a firm who works in this space all the time could help us navigate that. Because as you're saying that, just intuitively, I think, yeah, Twitter and Facebook are really different. So maybe it doesn't make sense to post the exact same thing both places. Thanks.
Okay.
The last thing I'll add there, sorry, Vice Mayor, I left off a thought. One of the things I'm concerned about, Council, is how we engage with young people. You know, like I said, I have a 20 and 22-year-old. We are a university town. My kids tell me the only reason they're on Facebook is to make sure their grandma knows, you know, like when they got a new job, you know. But the last thing they're looking for is stuff from the city. And so that's one of the things I hope that our firm could help us with, and that Then City can help us with as well, is really tracking where people want to see data that maybe we're not posting it right now, and reaching that college age and young professional population. So.
Great. So before I turn the meeting over to the mayor, are there any questions regarding this work session topic? I see the mayor. Okay, great. So Paul, you can take it from here. We are finishing up item 4 on our agenda and soon to go to 4A. So take it away from here.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Thank you for covering the meeting. I really appreciate it. Speaking of social media, you know, it's interesting, but I was watching our meeting on the YouTube platform, the live stream, which is also social media, actually, right? In fact, it's a very high volume use social media, and I don't know that we've really talked about that much in this meeting, but it's that continues to be a really heavily used social media platform and channel, right up there with the rest of them that we've talked about. And I think something that I'd like to see from the folks that we're working with, and I wonder what other city council people think about this, is not just what platform we use to try to engage young people, like the city manager says, you know, it's a college town, so forth and so on. We're not going to get rid of Facebook. Everybody uses Facebook. Grandma uses it, the grandkids use it so that they can tell grandma what's going on without having to make a phone call, so on and so forth. And I really like that approach. But I think another thing we need to figure out for every demographic is communicating to people why they want to follow the city on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And I think we need to figure out, and this is what those folks are, you know, the professionals for, but how do we get that message across? Why is it important for you to maybe have that in your feed? Why do you want to be on that channel? And I think this is what we always struggle with as the city, right? Is this overall messaging. So we can figure out how to use channels and platforms really, really effectively. But if people aren't going to engage with us on those and follow them, you know, we're kind of stuck where we are right now. And so that's what I'd like to see some advice from some folks that are professionals in that realm kind of help us with, because we know why we think people should follow us on these platforms, but how do we get that across to people, I think is really important. And that's why, like Councilor Harrington, I'm really glad to see this work session. We knew that we'd be getting it, and we really appreciate all the work that's gone into it. But that's what really strikes me is, you know, how do we sell people, so to speak, on engaging with the city of Laramie on that. So that's something I'd really like to get more follow up on as we go forward. And I know city manager and staff, I know you guys are going to do that, but it just amplifies it even more for me after this work session. We can figure out all the best ways to use things, but we've got to get people to buy into them in the first place. The rest of this is really, really interesting. Really glad to see it. And kind of impressed with how much is already being done, but at the same time, probably like the staff, I'm a little bit frustrated because we still get all this, I didn't know about this, I have never heard about this, why is this happening types of public comments from people. And I think it's sort of the same deal, you know, there really is a newspaper out there still. They do have more than one reporter most of the time. You know, if you want to average out, even over the last 5 years, most of the time they have more than one reporter covering the city beat. You know, they have the digital platform, and we have the public noticing requirements. We have the social media channels we do have, and yet we're constantly struggling with getting the word out to people, or people saying that they didn't know about something that was going on. And as we all know, counselors, by now, right? What happens is nobody knows what's going on until the last minute. And it's if it's an ordinance or something that requires multiple readings, it's the third reading that they're now aware of, or the second reading that's been postponed twice that they're now aware of, and then they get all upset. Constituents and our folks in Laramie get upset because they think it's the first time they've heard of it or the first time it's been talked about. Why is this happening this way? Why is it being done this way? And really, it's being done the same way we do everything else. Public hearings, public notice and readings, but people tend to get upset when A, it's something that affects them directly one way or another, and then B, they start paying attention to it when we're about 2/3 of the way through our process, right? That's always our challenge. So how do we use these social media and frankly, public outreach and public relations strategies to avoid that? I'm kind of soapboxing here, but I know those are consistent problems that we've dealt with for a long time. I mean, those of you that have been with me here on council for a while, do you agree with that assessment? That's kind of the way that goes? And I guess I'm reaching for the vice mayor there, but I feel like we've been talking about it for years, and that's the big problem, right? Is getting the info to people in a way that's timely so that they have a chance to feel like they have meaningful input on the process. It's not always easy. So just a couple of thoughts I have there, and I really appreciate you allowing me to share those, council. And I think the vice mayor said,
Mayor, if I could mention, you're absolutely right. I can't believe we didn't think to pull the statistics off YouTube, especially given our video meetings being so well attended over the last year and a half since we've really gotten into broadcasting council and other things. So, boy, what an oversight on my part. That is a huge part of our outreach, and we can try to pull some of those statistics as well and add them to this group of data that we have.
Well, city manager, I would just say, that wasn't intended to be a gotcha at all. It's just I just happened to be following our meeting on the YouTube channel before because I wanted folks to be able to get through their presentations before I'm sitting there hanging out in the waiting room, and I just kind of wanted to come in to the meeting since I was late to the meeting at a natural time. But yeah, I think it would be good to take a look at that, and also to maybe think about some ways we might use that channel. Also, I think each of these platforms reaches different people first, and I'm not a social media expert by any means, but I do understand that different channels or platforms are going to reach different audiences. Before, say, YouTube will get to somebody before Facebook and vice versa. So I think it would be good to take a look at that. There might be ways to optimize that.
Agreed. Thank you.
Before the vice mayor handed over the metaphorical gavel here, she was asking for other people's questions and comments. And of course I am too. I'm actually very keen to see what other council members think about this because, well, I think you heard my big spiel about why I think this is a major priority, and frankly, why I think our we have a problem with this in Laramie. I will say this: I don't think it's unique to Laramie. I think it's local government everywhere, right? But I think it's something we need to, and frankly, not just local government. I think it's getting people to engage with government. Period at any level is extremely difficult and only becoming increasingly important. And I think avoiding the whole, I don't even know what to call that. I just heard about this effect where, that's the first time we engage with our constituents is when, there's not enough time left for us to really do much about it. And they're nice and angry about whatever it is that's going on. And that's our first opportunity to engage with them. And that seems less than ideal. City Clerk.
Mayor, I just wanted to share really quick, as you were talking about YouTube, I did look at our YouTube page, and from July of last year to July of this year, it looks like we've had 2,929 views on our meetings.
Yeah, city manager.
I just have to follow up on that, Clerk. That's you said 2,000 views. And I think about the bulk of that material on YouTube is city council meetings, right? I mean, there's really nothing else there. Is that correct? Last I looked.
That's correct.
There's a good video about the fifth penny that's a little dated now that we need to update, but it's a pretty good video.
Very good. Council, just to put that in perspective, I have to tell you, I've been working with this city for 20 years now. I've been attending city council meetings for 13. I can't think of a single other year where 2,000 people came to council. That's just, wow. I'm stunned. Thank you, Nancy.
I'm going to take a moment here on behalf of some of the council members and my own views to say this is why the digital meetings and the hybrid meetings and frankly the straight video meetings that we've had for some time now don't concern me in terms of us not getting out to folks, because there's so many ways in which they can participate in these meetings and participate and engage with council. And you have to bear that in mind. I think that level of engagement has not existed in terms of council and the public, at least in the 8 years that I've been paying attention, more like 10 years that I've been paying attention to the city council. And it's remarkable to hear the city manager follow up with that, right? And you might say, oh, 2,000 views. Well, again, I think that's actually a pretty remarkably high number in terms of views. Now, do we know what we're getting for live views on that? Is that included in that total? If you don't know, I don't know either, but I wonder.
Just to do the math I did real quick, Mayor. So excluding your fifth Tuesdays, which happen roughly quarterly, right? So let's say out of 52 weeks, you have about 48 meetings. That's like 40 people per meeting on average, if you average that out. Assuming those are unique user views, that's a lot. I mean, I think about how many thousands of council meetings, hundreds at least, I've been to, and there's a lot of them where it was nobody but staff and council and maybe one or two people in the room.
Well, city manager, even if those aren't unique viewers, let's say a couple of hundred of them are people that are watching for the purposes of the boomerang or the council members going back to watch things. Even if you factor that in, you're still looking at a pretty large number of unique views. City clerk.
Mayor, to answer your question, it doesn't break out how many were live views and how many were,
Sure.
later.
Sure. And that's, I don't really think that changes much about this discussion. I'm glad we kind of had this little YouTube piece of it here, though, because I think YouTube's utilization as a platform certainly hasn't declined, right? And all these companies do a lot of smart things. Like Instagram and Facebook are basically the same group. We were talking about, I think the city manager referenced not using Instagram that much. My understanding is there's a way to set those up. Councilor Harrington, I think frankly, you're probably the council expert on social media at this point. And I believe that you have an ability to do a setting where basically whatever you post on one automatically posts to the other, correct? Or that might even be a default on that, depending on what type of post it is.
Yeah, that's right, Mayor. Instagram and Facebook, because they are the same parent company,
right,
allow you to sort of disseminate. So we talked about this earlier, about how it may not be the best idea to push the same content. It keeps your page active, but maybe is not the most engaging option. But certainly Instagram and Facebook have more in common than, say, like Twitter and Facebook or TikTok and Facebook.
And I recall your comments about that. I was just thinking about in terms of staff time to devote to these things. A lot of what we see on the Facebook feed tends to be those kinds of like news item bumps and calendar bumps. And I think that type of content does translate pretty well across the two platforms. But I understand your word of caution there. Not everything is going to do that.
Mayor, if I could also just note, when it comes to the city council meetings, they are aired on channel 191. I don't know if there's a method to track how many viewers we have. I'd have to check with IT on that. But also noting that when items are posted to Newsflash, my understanding from IT is that it also appears on channel 191 throughout the day. So I just wanted to note that for you as well. Assistant City Manager, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that.
You can join us. You can join us at any time. I think this is a pretty useful discussion. It doesn't seem like council's eager to have a lot of input on this. To me, one more time very quickly, I think, yeah, figuring out how we want to use different channels, so to speak, from YouTube to Facebook to everything else, and the most effective ways to do that are really important. But I think the overall big challenge is communicating to people why it's in their interest and why it's a good idea for them to engage with local government through those platforms. And I don't think it's impossible, and we'll do the best we can. I know we will. Councilmember O'Doherty.
That reminded me that when I spoke to the planners and passed on something about something that somebody asked, and I think it was Philip said, "Oh, we love it when people ask us questions because then we can explain it to them." So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Thanks.
Yeah. For a while, and city manager, this may still be going, but we used to have the Ask the City with one of the local media companies, and that would get a relatively decent engagement through that. And I wonder if that might be an approach through some of these other channels to try to use a little bit more regularly. Ask the City about X, and we'll go from there. Okay, well, again, as much as I'd like to force everyone to ask questions about this, I don't know that I have the ability to do that. And I think the comments so far have been pretty good. City Manager.
I just close out, Mayor, to say, thinking in your question of Ask the City, I probably have slightly neglected or not spent enough time talking about our more traditional media other than at the very beginning. But it should be noted that we have a really good partnership with a couple of the local radio stations. And I won't name names just to avoid giving one-ups to anybody, to any business, but we have a standing relationship with a couple of them, one in particular where, for instance, I go and appear on their community relations program once a month. I think other members of staff do as well. But they also push our public relations, public service announcements and stuff for us pretty heavily. And we have a strategy for how we work with them to do that. So they're really great partners too. I hate to over-focus on Facebook and forget our newspaper and our radio stations, who are awesome partners still, and for 100 years going back historically. So yeah, there is that out there.
I agree. And I'll say this, I think the local newspaper takes a lot of shrapnel. Frankly, I think they consistently have done a pretty, at least grade A job of covering city business, if not A+. And like local government, like lots of other organizations and entities, they struggle with 21st century issues as well. And they try to deal with those as best they can. And they take heat and they take criticism. But frankly, I think a lot of communities, council members, they don't have a local paper anymore. And a big conglomerate didn't buy them and keep them operating with other local papers in the region. Right? They just closed. That's the alternative. No local paper. So I'm pretty appreciative of it. And I continue to subscribe digitally and so forth. Not making an advertisement here. I'm talking about the vital role they play in small communities. A lot of places don't have it anymore. And so as much criticism as I think some people level at the local newspaper, I'd sure rather have them there in almost any form than not have them at all. Anyway, enough of my advertisement for the Boomerang. What else? Anybody else? Should we see if there's a, yeah, Councilmember Gabriel, good.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I remember back in the old days, Bob Roten from the Boomerang would write a pre-council story, and it would go down the agenda. Here's what's coming up, and of course, you know, things have changed a little bit, but that was very informative back in the 80s and 90s. People knew what was coming up on the agenda, and I think it was very effective for people. Oh, this item I might be interested in. I might come down to council, or I want to comment or contact my council member and find out what's going on or voice my opinion, whatever it might be. And I just remember the pre-council stuff was very important, but things have changed a little bit, but you never know. Maybe, I think the Boomerang's doing a heck of a job. This is a very tough media market now all across the country, and they're making changes and they're moving on. But I remember old Bob Roten. He was the old city council guy, and he did his job really well.
I really I agree with those comments. I think some kind of a preview of meetings in the media is good, and I don't just mean that what's happening next week, right? Tuesday meeting city council, but I'm not going to tell them how to do things. But I think that's an intriguing idea to me, and I assume that applied to a lot of local government activity, maybe the county commissioners and things like that. Here's what's coming, because I think the reporters kind of have an idea about what are the attention-grabbing topics, and having articles before the fact as opposed to after the fact is an interesting idea. And I agree with all those other comments, Councilor Gabriel, and appreciate your making them. I want to see if there's a public comment here on some of this. Seeing none, council members, back to you if you have thoughts. Seems to be taking folks a little while to get the courage to weigh in on this, but eventually they do. And if not, that's all right. We can keep going to the rest of it. Would you like to move forward, council, to the next works? Okay. All right. So we've got updates and council comments. Yes, Councilmember O'Doherty. Thank you.
I think Cindy Williams probably presented the whole report to the Traffic Commission, that UW's traffic study. And you'll be happy to know that the dates are not all when students were out. And so anyway, that was presented to the Traffic Commission, and I just got there at the end of the meeting because I lost track of time. But you know, the people on Traffic Commission, they love this kind of stuff. So they're reading it carefully, and we'll have more comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. And yep, we always want to give a comment of appreciation towards our volunteer people on these boards and commissions that are really engaged. Councilmember Schmeckel, I saw your hand up next. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Laramie Beautification Committee meets this Thursday, 4 o'clock. But also the Laramie Rifle Range held its annual meeting here this last month, with congratulations to 4 board members that were elected: Jean Gautreau, Tom Matamore, Joe Nottage, and Rex Reese.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmeckel. Councilmember Harrington, I've got you up next.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a quick update. The Public Art Coalition is holding a board retreat this Thursday, and we'll be sort of strategizing for the future, working to contain and figure out how they will grow moving forward as they have more opportunities and are doing significantly more work in the community. So I will report back next go round for what comes of that. That's all I have for you.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of things, frankly, on the calendar for that organization that we only have an inkling of. City Manager.
Thanks, Mayor. I know it isn't typical for me to update during updates, but I appreciate being given the chance. And as a heads up, Todd, I'm going to ask you to help me with this one so you can get your camera and your mic on. I wanted to let you know that the fire training facility just to the south of Interstate 80 is pretty much finished, and there was a call for art put on. And I believe this weekend, Todd, is the public art unveiling, and I just thought it was cool enough to mention to you all in updates that the gentleman who successfully got that call for art and designed the art installation there is in fact one of our own firefighters who is educated in obviously a completely different arena. So Todd, help me out here because you probably have the dates in front of you handy.
That's correct, Janine. On Saturday from noon to 1:30, Brandon Russell will be there to meet the artist along with the Laramie Public Art Coalition. There'll also be some fire trucks on display. He'll give a little talk about what the art means, which is called the Vitruvian Firefighter, if I get that right, based on Vitruvian, yeah, the Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. It's an excellent piece. I've seen it.
It's the guy, for those anybody, it's the guy with the like arm diagram, right? Yeah. The picture of this, is really cool. Sorry, Todd, go ahead.
That's right. And they're also going to have free root beer floats for anybody that shows up. So we hope to see a lot of people come out that day.
Yeah, I just think it's so special, Mayor, that one of our own was able to get that award for the best public art design and put that out there. So wanted to make you all aware of that if you weren't already. Thanks for the chance to tell you.
The city manager and other staff members, I don't think, sometimes I get a little nervous about speaking on behalf of council, but I highly doubt the council is ever going to have a problem with comment and updates from the sector and council comments and updates. I think it's totally appropriate. Frankly, I saw a news article about this in a local news organization that I already talked a lot about, but I won't mention again, that did a really good piece on this, and I thought it was great. I think I also saw a mention of this upcoming art presentation. And yeah, I think it's extremely cool that one of our firefighters has this interest in sculpture and was able to pursue that through the Public Art Commission and frankly, see this project through out there. I think that's unique, and like the city manager said, unique enough that it definitely bears mentioning. Maybe more than once. We'll talk about it again later. Any other council comments or updates? Seems like there's been a lot going on, but we're mostly engaged with it. I have a comment. I think I've seen more activity from the mosquito spray trucks over the last couple of weeks than I ever remember before. It seems like they're really going out a lot. Assistant City Manager Feeser, tell me about that. Is there more spray activity than normal? Have we upped it, or am I just perceiving it that way?
Mayor, I don't think we have not upped it, but what you're seeing is the ability to spray more due to weather. Remember that the wind's over 10 miles an hour and temperatures below, I think, 55 degrees. We can't do that. And we're finally seeing some conditions that allow us to see that. I've actually noticed that myself, that it seems like they're coming around a bit more regular, but it's still, we're certainly fighting a batch of nuisance mosquitoes that we're trying to effort and figure out what happened. So we're doing our best that we can right now.
Well, something else I've noticed, Assistant City Manager, is a lot less mosquitoes biting the crap out of me. So something's working, but I have noticed the trucks out too.
Yeah.
All right. Other comments or updates, folks? This is always, I think this is that portion. This is that work session where we have a bunch of meetings for our committees upcoming. So it'll be the next time that you've got more updates. So I appreciate it from everyone. Councilmember Cumby, can I put you on the spot and ask you when your next meeting with the Albany County Mental Health Board is coming up, and a little bit about those?
I believe I just got notification for September 6th.
Okay.
And that's for the main board, but the crisis response group will meet in August, but the date has not gone out on the calendar yet.
Thank you, and I really
And,
apologize. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember Cumby. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. I do plan to meet with Dr. Cavello just to brainstorm about things and how to better connect and how for me to best serve in my capacity as liaison.
Thank you. And again, it's a little unusual to put people on the spot, but I think that's
I
kind
don't mind.
that's at the top of mind for some of us. But yes, go ahead, Councilmember Cumby.
I thought, well, my mic is open. I'll go ahead and tell you that Vice Mayor Pierce and I have been busy at work on the COVID strategic response thing. I'm the kind of person that likes to work really hard and get something done like that. And this is, it's teaching me patience and perseverance and stamina. So we're meeting tomorrow with Dr. Elias and Kim Maturi, who's the supervisor nurse at Public Health. And I will say that both of them have been very active, and that it's been great to be able to work with Dr. Elias and Kim and Dr. Bisha. So we will all be meeting tomorrow to put together the content that will be going into our media campaign. We've been working with individuals from Town Square about implementing exactly what Janine's been talking about tonight, is having a service that can push it all out there, and where we're not trying to ask city staff to do things on website and to make announcements, etc., that we actually contract with the money that we've been given for community engagement and education, that we contract with a professional to get that information and media out there. So our start date, our launch date, is looking at about maybe August 15. And Vice Mayor Pierce and I talked about engaging in 3 months, trying to raise community engagement with this company. We will be able to see the metrics, what's working, what's not working, so that we can adjust the campaign. And then after 3 months, the CDC will be launching the fall vaccination campaign for people to boost, and we can tie into that and continue to try to connect with the community. So we're really looking forward to getting that out. And it's taken a while, but it looks like we're almost there.
I really appreciate that, Councilmember Cumby. And we're going to talk about that every week during updates, council members, at least while I'm still here. Why? I don't know. A cursory glance at the Casper Star Tribune might give you a clue as to why. 1,070 new cases in 1 week, active cases 441, 42 hospitalized patients, 7 deaths announced between the last update and now. This pandemic is not over, and you'll continue to hear me resisting that perception that this is something that is done and we can move on and everything's okay. I happen to disagree, and I like that the city is pursuing this public awareness process as we move forward. Thank you, Councilmember Cumby.
Thank
Any
you.
other council member updates or comments? All right. Appreciate that, everyone. And we will go to agenda review. Have a look at that agenda and the items there and see what you think. Questions and comments on consent agenda first. And we'll talk about the regular agenda if you have any questions or comments on that, Council. Thank you. I see we've got some old favorites returning for their third reading on the consent agenda, as we might expect. City Clerk, I want to just thank you again for your homework on that new liquor license and what the information you provided with us last time. It's a little bit kind of an unusual item, and I was struck by the fact that with your reporting back to us on that, the state liquor division itself has sort of said we need to wait and see how some of these things roll out. So I guess as a city we can feel comfortable adopting it because that's what we're hearing from the state authority on it. But I'd feel less comfortable with that if I hadn't gotten that information from you. So there it is on the reading, and let's let it stay there. It'll be interesting to see what happens with it moving forward.
Mayor, I appreciated the questions. I think they were great questions, and I was glad that you asked them. So we're happy to do research anytime.
Yeah, I know you all are, and I just really appreciated what you came up with us for us on that one. Anybody else have anything on the consent agenda, or would like to say something nice to the city clerk? Okay, all right. How about the regular agenda? This is a pretty small regular agenda compared to the last couple of weeks, City Manager, but that doesn't necessarily mean that these things are going to take any less time. I like that we're going to get a pavement condition index evaluation. Everybody knows how much I love that. Is this, when do we expect that these folks will be done after if and when we award the services agreement? Or are you going to talk to us about that next week?
That's fine, Mayor and Council. The turnaround time on this is fairly quick, actually, with the ability to use some of the most current technology to complete this evaluation, since we are moving to a new methodology, a new service provider, and really a new way of capturing the data. So Director Webb is ready to give you all of the specific details on Tuesday, but I think you're going to be pleased with what he has to tell you.
Okay. I'm really nervous about what we get back from PCI on this, but maybe I should be. But council members, I'm frightened that what we're going to hear is we have a lot of things that are behind the times, and we need to figure out a plan to get a lot of streets up past, a D rating on our streets. But some of that is beyond my purview as a council member, and I should just wait and hear what the staff has to say. I'm just nervous about it. All right. Anybody else have anything on the regular agenda? Going to get some snow removal equipment out at the airport. Here in Laramie, we need that badly, I'm sure. Okay, well, I don't see a lot of eager questions and comments, but I thank you, staff. I thank council members, and I'll go back on YouTube and watch the earlier part of this that I wasn't able to join you for because I'm interested in that as well. Shall we close the work session without objection? Thank you, everybody. Good night. Thank you.